Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ARC 3015, LAN3016, and URD2013 Options Studio balloting presentation and Q&A session. The format today is split into two components: a presentation portion where each instructor is here to give a 5-minute presentation on their section, and then we will open up breakout rooms for further discussion for the Q&A section. To begin, I will post a few things into the chat. Firstly, the actual balloting form. Here we go. And then secondly, the order of the presenters. Okay. Hopefully this is I might have to do this in sections.
Where is the order of the presenters? I actually don't know.
It's on the course description, but I'm about to post it in the chat for everyone's benefit. Hopefully that looks good. Okay. It's not the best formatting, but we have the order. Okay. So the balloting form is now opening, and the deadline will be Wednesday, July 29th, 2026 at noon. So for all students, please ensure to submit your ballot section by the deadline. We're also recording the presentation component of today for your review, and we will post this to the course description page, which I will also post in the chat. So lots of things in chat. For your review over the next 2 days while you are making your selection. This will go up to a YouTube link and be posted into the page. Just a note to presenters, this is just a kindly reminder to adhere to the 5-minute limit to allow everyone enough time in the Q&A section. I will be sending an individual broadcast to you to wrap up at the 5-minute mark. So at this point, I'll just pass it along over to Vivian Lee for a brief introduction to say a few more words, and then we'll get to our first presenters, Bridget Shim and Robert Wright.
I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to just give all the time to the instructors. So go ahead, Bridget and Rob.
Can you see that?
Yep. It's loading. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. I'll start. So this is the third of these courses that Bridget and I have done together that combine all 3 disciplines. But what we're looking at today, we're going to be looking at the McCreary District in Portland's. Every generation inherits a different city. Ours is defined by now in Toronto by uncertainty, climate change, landscape, reshaping landscape, artificial intelligence, housing, working needs, manufacturing is changing. The city is now changing faster than we can predict. So perhaps the question is no longer, why should the city become? But perhaps the real question is, how should we design a city capable of becoming many different futures? This is what this studio is all about, not designing a fixed master plan, but designing for urban indeterminacy. Bridget?
Yep, so this is an amazing site at the mouth of the Don with this incredible film port district. Film, television, digital media, and a really important employment hub. But there's a whole series of empty blocks next to it. And in a way, the question is, what is the future? And how can we design both a kind of urban form that actually addresses a different kind of future, tying together ecology, culture, and public life? We're really interested in developing new urban typologies for really interesting multi-purpose spaces embedded in the middle of an urban block. So we're really excited about the kind of potential of these building types, actually creating a different kind of neighborhood in the city. Rob.
Okay, I can move on to the next slide. So cities are not done by only one discipline. Architecture cannot solve on its own climate adaptation. Landscape alone cannot solve housing. Urban design alone cannot create memorable spaces. The future belongs to designers who can think across disciplines. Throughout the studio, you will move continuously between scales, from ecological systems to districts to streets to buildings to materials and human experience. You will learn the city as one connected design problem.
Next slide.
Yeah, it's on.
So we'll begin with relationships before objects. We'll do research and experimentation as a way of addressing these new typologies. We'll test alternate futures rather than accepting one singular formula for development. That's where the whole issue of new typologies comes into place. Can living and working be made to be combined? And can we build purpose-built studio facilities adjacent to existing already thriving facilities to create a meaningful public realm? Can streets, blocks, landscapes, and buildings support a different kind of cultural exchange and a different kind of experimentation? So we're trying to connect the dots and really lay the groundwork for some really interesting typologies for a new future for this neighborhood.
We will be conducting a field trip in Montreal, learning from the unfinished city. We will be going to the CCA, the Old Port, La Chine Canal, Peel Basin, Silo number 5, and examining and working with existing practices. We're going to be walking, sketching, deleting, and analyzing where Montreal becomes our classroom.
And then finally, in closing, the studio is designed for students who want to do more than a kind of predetermined master plan. We want students to collaborate initially on different alternatives and then develop individual proposals in the latter part of the studio. You'll be engaged in one of Toronto's most interesting parts of the city, the waterfront, and explore new urban typologies for living, working, and making, and that can also support housing and the film and creative production industry. So this and all of this results in effect supporting a meaningful new public realm. And hopefully the work that we do should provide some really interesting precedents for a lot of the urban design and building work that's taking place. So we should in effect be leading the way and showing in effect really exciting new examples that will hopefully be realized in the future. So we're very excited. We love collaborating and working together and to really provide some really meaningful projects that push the limits and test what could be happening in this future neighborhood in the city. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So next up, we have Shane Williamson.
Great. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce this option studio titled The Weight of Empty Holds. This will be a site-specific studio in Savannah, Georgia. 1 second. Savannah is an extraordinary living laboratory. The Oglethorpe Plan is a unique 18th century Enlightenment urban design that expanded systematically via a grid of repeating wards anchored by 22 preserved and walkable public squares. Situated on a high bluff overlooking the Savannah River, the city's relationship to the coast demonstrates how a highly disciplined, non-hierarchical urban framework can create an intimate human scale while fostering a rich, multi-century timeline of diverse building typologies. The cobblestones on River Street in Savannah are not from Georgia, though. They are ballast consisting of rocks loaded into the holds of empty ships that cross the Atlantic. When those ships reached Savannah and filled their holds with rice, cotton, and indigo, the stones were dumped on the riverbank. On other legs of the same voyages, those same holds carried enslaved Africans, who were the very ones to lay the cobblestones in the streets. The rice that made Savannah a financial stronghold of the antebellum South was cultivated using agricultural knowledge stolen from West Africa's rice coast, as Europeans simply did not possess the expertise in tidal irrigation and wetland management. The Gullah Geechee descendants of the people who carried that knowledge are still in the area, still practicing it, and still largely uncredited. This image is is a curious image because it's from the late 1700s and it's actually from a slaveholder. It's curious because it's the only known painting of the time that depicts African Americans by themselves, concerned only with each other and their culture. As time passed, ships that once held stone ballast began to carry ballast water, and with it, a tide of uninvited organisms, including Asian green mussels. On land, kudzu, Chinese tallow, and dozens of other introduced species have rewritten the region's ecology. A recent study found that 1/3 of all plant species growing at the port terminal in Savannah are non-native. This studio will visit Savannah and ask you to design a building that holds all of this at once. The Ballast Garden Material Library is a hybrid institution prominently located on Savannah's waterfront. It is part geological archive, part controlled garden, part memorial, and part living space for Gullah Geechee agricultural knowledge that predates the city itself. Let's start this video. It is a building organized not by program alone, but by vector, with emphasis upon how things arrived, who carried them, and what was lost in the crossing. For sake of time, I'm going to just advance this video of this ship coming into port. Even time is collapsing, and our site is on the left of this ship as we're seeing it, which I'll show in just a little bit more. The site sits between the Oglethorpe Grid and the Savannah River, residing between Enlightenment order and tidal disorder. It is also between the tourist surface and the deep history beneath it. Your project will work in the section of the bluff, the warehouses, the water's edge, and explore the potential of architecture to contain what cannot be reconciled, display what should not be aestheticized, and memorialize what must not be forgotten. So a bit of context for Savannah itself. The Savannah River and this one highlighted label here is the building that will be the essentially what will be our site. But the Savannah River is at Savannah is at the mouth of the Savannah River, which is the boundary between Georgia and South Carolina. It's one of the unique features of this area, of course, are the intracoastal waterways, and you can see the coastal edge. And the rather esoteric character of all of and this tidal plane. To the top of this image and the beaches here, this will be Hilton Head, South Carolina, and toward the middle is Tybee Island in Savannah. So as we move into the Savannah River itself, we begin to see the historic district. The building highlighted in the middle, the Hyatt Regency, will be the site. And I'm moving closer in. Now, the Hyatt is a controversial building and one that we will be removing. It's a large site, a controversial building because it spans over River Street and is quite a disruptive figure. In the removal of this building and the treatment of the site, it establishes one of the most prominent locations within the city. Now, as noted, the transition between city and river is deeply mediated by the bluff that you're seeing here. And that mediation, in fact, and that section will be one of the more interesting aspects of this project. Here you're seeing these bridges connecting the bluff to buildings on the river. These bridges are known as Factors Walk. Factors were the individuals who priced cotton for the cotton exchange. Again, another industry deeply rooted with slave culture in the South at the time. And here we're seeing this kind of longitudinal view across Factors Walk, all the bridges spanning the bluff to buildings, and we see City Hall behind, which is the building with the gold dome. On the right, you begin to understand the section between what is the bluff and the River Street. This is City Hall as well behind. And here's a panoramic view showing that transition from bluff with Factors Walk, all of the bridging conditions between bluff and city. And so one of the more interesting buildings on the site is, in fact, the Cotton Exchange, right? This that is now the Chamber of Commerce for the city. So we're seeing a historical image on the left, a contemporary image on the right, And this building has one of the more kind of engaging aspects of section within the site as well. So we see looking toward the river, this is this in this transition zone of Factors Walk. And you can see underneath the building here, there's a passage to the river. So the image on the right is from the river looking back at the building. And then better understanding here that on the left, the historic images of the cotton warehouses that existed on the river to the left are now this new tourist district on the right. Now, our site, which is currently a hotel, is the image of the building that's deep on the right that's spanning over the street itself. I mean, curiously, I had always thought that this building had received a variance for its spanning character, but in fact, historically, it was a fertilizer, a guano factory from the past that spanned over River Street, and it was the height that was really the variance at the time. So, many of you have likely, if you haven't visited Savannah, you've seen Savannah in film. This is from Forrest Gump, of course. But it's really indicative that Savannah is a city of immeasurable beauty. The square is the historic district. There's much to love about the city, and it's a really fantastic place to visit. But it's also a city with a very complicated past. And we'll be engaging both aspects of this, the beauty and the past, within the studio. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Next up, we have Richard Sommer.
Good morning. Hope everyone's having a good summer. Let me just get my share thing together here. Okay. So before I share my screen and get into the studio, I just want to speak to how I see the Option Studio in a much different light than the core studios most of you have experienced up until now. My aim with this course will be to create a studio where members are free to take risks, explore their own ideas, and use the semester as a staging point for the more fully independent work you're going to do with your thesis in the winter. This means that the term will be organized with a series of conceptual exercises leading to the midterm, which will involve a proposal for what I'm calling the Ursula Franklin Union. And in the second half of the semester, each student will have the opportunity to define a focus for their projects and to determine how they want to operate, for example, on a spectrum ranging in scale and focus from a detailed architecture to urban design and landscape. So let me share the screen. The studio will begin with question. Can everyone see the screen? Can people see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. The studio will begin with questions about the role a university's architecture can play in cultivating minds and bodies today, both collectively and as individuals. So we'll explore these questions by designing a new college, the Ursula Franklin Union, on the superblock formerly occupied by the Canadian Center for Mental Health campus that sits just south of One Spadina. A fundamental thing that I'm going to ask the studio to think about is how the university and its architecture, how they think about it as something that organizes time and the daily cycles of life as much as it organizes space. So this is a map of the daily life cycle of some famous creative people, and it's got a real mix: Le Corbusier, Maya Angelou, and Charles Darwin. And I love this because Darwin, perhaps one of the most influential thinkers in human history, appears to have only spent 5 hours a day formally working, and this during the most productive and healthy period in his life, when he wrote The Origin of Species. And 2 of these hours were spent lying in bed, quote, solving problems before he went to sleep. So this is a reconstructed plan of the Benedictine cloister at Gall from the 9th century, a scheme I'm a bit obsessed with. The monks did spend a lot of time circumambulating the cloister in contemplation, but 3/4 of this walled precinct is devoted to non-prayer activities. Many of them life-sustaining physical tasks like gardening, animal husbandry, with kitchens for baking, paper-making workshops, baths, and an infirmary. So we're going to look back to radical forms of the ecclesiastical cloister, the courtyard, the cloister walk, and shared refectory as spaces of study, reflection, and communal life, and forward to the ways that universities are reinventing themselves in light of both technological urban determination and the demands of an increasingly diverse transnational society. And that might mean looking outside the university for clues. Here's a kind of warped or porous cloister designed by OMA in Beijing, really, frankly, not that different from the monastery at St. Gall. And then another example in China by Liu Shikun, which creates its own nature-based enclave, kind of recreational enclave. We can also look to some modern architects that took on the problem of actually designing a cloister in the 20th century, including Le Corbusier and Louis Kahn. And it's very curious to note, by the way, that one of the massive behemoth buildings on the site we're working on is a kind of bad copy of La Tourette. This is the clinical block next to one Spadina and La Tourette on your left. We can also look to and tour some great cloister-inspired colleges right here at University of Toronto, Massey College and Knox College among them. And I'm not averse to taking longer field trips more far afield to look at these sort of things. So during the first half of the semester, I'll ask the studio to investigate the design of potential components of what I'm calling this quasi-cloister, again, looking back and forward in an effort to reconceive how we think of a relationship between certain activities and the architectural shapes and sounds and temperatures they might assume. And this will include the dormitory, the gymnasium, the bath, the study hall and the classroom, the winter garden and greenhouse, the kitchen and refectory, and the library and mediatheque. We will also need to explore what shape the Ursula Franklin Union might take, or what I'm calling the quasi-cloister within the urban context. With regard to the existing conditions on the site, the landscape here constitutes an almost moat-like condition, and the existing concrete buildings contain a massive amount of embodied energy, and the members of the studio will have to decide which and what aspects of these structures to retain. So U of T recently acquired this site and plans to eventually clear the buildings and perhaps stage about 1.5 million square feet of new campus buildings. We're not obligated to take on that, but we will have the advantage of a recently completed master plan in St. George that not so much considers the site, but looks at pedestrianizing and greening the western side of the campus. The studio will develop its proposals in the context of the university's history and contemporary place in the city. You might know that U of T is going to celebrate its 150th centennial this year, and the university was conceived in the 1820s as a Victorian college in a forest, which was then at the northern limits of what is now Toronto. Now it's surrounded by the city, but that forest in a way is still there. And I have added in this diagram one Spadina Crescent and the study area in red. This slightly later map, in this map, we can see that the outlines of an urban pattern we can still experience today is here with the green campus and the western part. And I would insist this pattern, and this is extremely important to understand. This is how the university sees the different precincts, including the one we're going to work on in purple today. Another important aspect of this urban scale of work of conceptualizing and reconfiguring the relationship between the Franklin Union and the former KMH site, looking at the east and west side of the campus and where the city is expanding, is to test fit the site according to different block typologies. And these will include the mat, the punctuated field, the perimeter block, and what I call the micro block. To close, I want to return to my earlier points about how architecture organizes and shapes time as much as it does space. This is a critical distinction to make today, given the degree to which certain technologies are seeking to colonize our very consciousness. And this is something Ursula Frankton warned us about. So my proposition to you is that to design the first new college here in more than a half century is to imagine that the way students, teachers, and their communities inhabit a university should ideally yield an architecture that engenders better ways of living, and that this architecture has implications well beyond the university's walls. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Up next, we have John Schneer.
Okay. I assume everybody can see my screen. I can't see my screen.
We
Well,
can, but
we
it's,
can hear
you might want to Control L or make it the biggest.
yeah. There we go, right? Good.
Great.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so this is really, my studio is really super straightforward. I don't even need 5 minutes. It's going to be a little bit of a mischievous studio based on reimagining a kind of what if, and that is looking at the West Island of Ontario Place and asking the question, what if it truly were only a spa? The Therme project that's been sanctioned by the Ontario government is like roughly 500,000 square feet of development that, in spite of the promise not to obliterate the heritage landscape of Michael Huff, in fact, did that almost immediately after the scaffolding went up. And what you see on the left side of the screen is a kind of version of the current scheme to create not what we might euphemistically call a spa, but rather a kind of mega theme park with the subject of water. On the right side is the Blue Lagoon. If you take the Blue Lagoon program and subtract the hotel portion, you've got a project of probably under 50,000 square feet or 5,000 square meters. So the studio proposes, what if we make a much smaller project on the West Island? Can we have a profit for-driven, self-interested project coexist with mutual self-interest with public land and a kind of collaborative use of the West Island? So really, that's what this studio is asking us to look at, placing a much more modest project. We're going to reimagine to a certain extent, some amount of the heritage landscape that Huff proposed existing in some shape or another. We have archival documentation of it. We'll create base drawings thanks to Alyssa North and Rob Wright. And to get in the mood, we're going to go to Iceland and visit a bunch of spas. That's all I have to say. I can elaborate on some of the themes, which are themes that are common to my studios, which I think are really applicable to thesis in general. And it should be a really interesting, engaging, mischievous, and fun kind of re-examination of a piece of artificial terrain at the edge of our city. I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, John. If you could please stop sharing. Up next, we have Christine and Peter.
Hi, can you hear us?
Okay.
Yeah, we
Hi
can hear
there.
you.
Are we on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christine Hoping Kong.
And I'm Peter Tan of Studio Junction. We are very excited to be teaching Live Make typologies. At Studio Junction, we design, make, and build. We have always been makers. It is at the core of our architecture development and our work philosophy. We also teach wood in architecture, a hands-on elective at U of T in close coordination with the Daniels Workshop.
This course is based on research before and after our pre-to-Rome years, where we focused on live make spaces and maker districts and how they can transform neighborhoods.
Christine, sorry to jump in. There's nothing shared, right? That's
nothing shared.
okay. Just making sure. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So we studied these wonderfully messy, energetic, and sometimes chaotic maker spaces and maker districts, ones that didn't quite fit into a city's rigid zoning structure.
I would like to introduce a few definitions that we will use quite often in this course. We will use the word maker. We mean a person who fabricates or makes and needs a dedicated workspace specific to their livelihood or occupation. A baker and a kitchen, a tailor with a sewing workroom. Next is a live-make dwelling, a space with both housing and workshop specific to a livelihood. And maker district. When we move away from exclusionary zoning towards an inclusive zoning, we open up the possibilities. There's potential for a neighborhood with more hybrid use of building typologies, one that can develop an ecosystem with a variety of makers, making activities and workshop spaces.
I'd like to expand about our case studies. So affordable housing and affordable workspace is now a pressing global topic. While live-make dwellings were common in many countries throughout the ages, current live-make dwelling buildings and neighborhoods are rare, and there is limited documentation. We've selected live-make sites that are primarily urban or inner city, of industrial heritage, and undergoing urban renewal or regeneration. The scale varies from immense to tiny. The students will analyze these live-make sites with regards to context, zoning, adaptive reuse, socioeconomics, urban renewal, and gentrification.
And now I would like to expand on the site visits, one of the more unique and enjoyable components of this course. During the first part of the semester, we will be setting up neighborhood walks in the junction and site visits to a variety of maker spaces and workshops. We would like to have conversations with these makers, how they get their start. Did they begin in a garage, basement, kitchen, or storefront? What is their neighborhood like? Their current building zoning? What is their living situations? We want to understand the challenges they face and need to overcome in the future.
We are planning a studio trip to Belgium and the Netherlands, and I would like to say that the travel component is optional, not mandatory, and the students will not be disadvantaged if they're not taking part. The students who do travel will document what they've learned and experienced and share with the group on their return. This field trip offers the students an opportunity to get a little glimpse of the changing relationships between industry, manufacturing, and urban morphology in Northern Europe throughout the different ages, such as medieval, Gothic, Industrial Revolution, and the present. The first few days would focus on medieval small-scale cottage industries in Bruges, and the guild house system in Ghent, and how these live-make typologies contributed to this flourishing economy and influenced the urban morphology. And centuries after, Belgium was the first country in continental Europe to become industrialized. And when these legacy industries declined or failed, the surrounding neighborhoods underwent periods of blight. In Ghent, Brussels, and Kortrijk, we will visit current examples of the adaptive reuse of Belgium's industrial buildings. And the Netherlands came later to the Industrial Revolution, but its manufacturing cities powered the industrial belt in Northern Europe. In Rotterdam and Amsterdam, we would focus on individual live-make hybrid buildings and visit sites undergoing large-scale urban renewal. We are planning for 8 days, not including travel days. If interested, there are several programs you can apply to from some financial assistance from U of T.
The site for the final project is the Junction in Toronto, a neighborhood known for its railway infrastructure and former stockyards and manufacturing businesses. The Junction has a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial zoning in a compact area. Most of our attention will be on the areas filled with modest working-class homes and workspaces. Manufacturing is scattered throughout this neighborhood, and there are official and unofficial attempts by small-scale makers to create live-make solutions.
We will be experimenting with a maker zoning and hybrid buildings, creating a neighborhood where it's legal for live and make to coexist in the same building, or for workshops to be in close proximity to residential. We hope this is a multidisciplinary studio and welcome students from architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design.
The ability to transform a neighborhood is rarely done with 1 or 2 projects. Urban renewal requires urban planning, changes to zoning, and a critical mass of entrepreneurs that work within this framework. In this neighborhood, urban design and landscape architecture can play critical roles in connecting the disparate parts of the junction brought on by the railway infrastructure. We will be experimenting with a variety of hybrid types of live-make typologies. Students will be encouraged to develop their own narrative, to combine a type of maker and their living situations, and then select the site that seems to have the most potential for the live-make exploration.
We look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you. Okay, we're done.
Thank you, Christine and Peter. Next up, we have Michael, and I hope I'm not mispronouncing this, Arancha.
Yeah, that was perfect pronunciation.
All right, so this studio is really an extension of our ongoing artistic research with materiality and craft. And these studies began at the scale of architecture before really shifting sort of to objects and furniture. And now with this course, we're looking at scaling back up to spatial applications. And as a way of framing this, one thing that we continue to find in our practice is that despite our best efforts, construction is just messy work. Not only is it extremely complex from a number of vantage points, but with everything being built out of rigid materials and products, it's kind of a game of gaps and tolerances to deal with, nothing being straight, square, level, or plumb. And so this studio really posits that by introducing more uncertainty to the design and construction processes, we not only discover more means of, more novel artistic architectural expression, but also building strategies that can actually be more practical despite perhaps being more rudimentary in nature. And so to investigate these ideas, the studio will focus exclusively on experimenting with fabric-formed casting. Both textile and castable materials like concrete or plaster, for example, are, of course, inherently formless on their own. But together, there's a sort of mutual embrace where the final geometry is actually the result of countless physical factors, gravity, hydrostatic pressure, material behavior, or even intentional manipulation during the casting process. In other words, the exact final form can only be foreseen to a certain extent, and can actually adapt to its environment at will through the casting process. So here there's sort of this tremendous aesthetic and practical potential here.
Yes, and the way that we'll structure the studio will be starting with presidents. We'll be going over work of architects such as Miguel Fisac, Enzo Uno, Mark West, and Ronnie Araya. And following the presidents, we'll get started with the experimentation phase. This is intended as an iterative process where you'll cast with total liberty and learn from each casting, what worked, what didn't work, what's a surprising outcome. And basically by keeping a detailed log of every casting that you do during this process, you'll be able to refine your casting and learn as you go. As your casting becomes more refined and more intentional, we will enter into the translation phase. Here's where you'll start to imagine how this casting can be integrated in a building. Maybe it can be a wall, and if it's a wall, maybe it's going to be a monolithic wall. It could be a modular wall. It could be a screen. Maybe it's going to be a structural system of columns and beams. You start to kind of like make the approximation of how this would work inside a building. And at last, we will be moving into the refinement and speculation phase, where you will explore efficiencies in the process. Like, for example, how can we use less material? How can we use less labor? How can maybe improve, like use that the form can be reusable? So all these types of things. And for the speculation portion, you will be showcasing how your system can work within a building in a more concrete manner. For that purpose, one of the deliverables for the course will be a large-scale model. It could be similar to this one by Anne Holtrop. In addition, we will be asking for a full-scale model of a detail that you will be developing. This is an example on the right of Enzo Uno. This wall had this pattern, and basically what they did was put pebbles into the fresh concrete and then cast over it. So something similar to that. We will be also requesting one image. Nowadays, with all the computer software, it's very easy to create tons of images. We're just asking for one so that it can be something very intentional that would showcase your system that you have developed working within a building environment. And at the same manner, we will be asking for construction drawings intended not so much to give the details of the unit itself, but rather using the drawings as like a communication tool to explain the process that you follow to achieve that shape within the building. Altogether, the course aims to push your individual creativity, encourage risk-taking, and get you out of the computer and explore unconventional design processes where construction is not opposed to design, but rather like an integral part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Up next, we have Amin.
Did I hear correct, or was that me?
That is you. Yes.
Sorry. I was literally getting calls from Steve and Pierre, who are meant to be joining. Hopefully they can join. Otherwise, I'll do it on my own. Bear with me a second. I'm going to share. Right. Ours is going to be, so can you actually see a screen? Have I got the right screen? Yeah.
All good.
Ours is going to be shared with architect, stonemason, and structural engineer. And the title is essentially stone. And why stone? Because obviously we're in a climate crisis, and currently the construction sector contributes about 40% of annual CO2 emissions. Do we have any agency as architects, engineers, landscape designers in that? Well, we do if we understand the ingredients that go into the materials into the building itself. So ingredients, we just pop backwards and forwards between those two, just like the ingredients in your shopping basket and your food at home that you contrive at home. Same with construction. Right at the bottom there is timber. The next material up is stone. So we're not going to just concentrate on stone, but begin to teach a technology that allows the mixture of those materials. So instead of a 40% contributor, you become potentially a carbon sequestrating architect, designer. How do we do that? Well, there's plenty of timber, but not enough to go around in sustainable forestry. There's more than enough to go around in stone. Why in stone? Well, stone, just like timber, is a single source material, very low in its embodied carbon. And if you look at the measurement of the embodied carbon of a building across its lifespan, you will see even in 2017, the majority is its materials. If you look at the history of operational carbon and embodied carbon and materials, pre-industrial revolution till now, you'll see that the materials were key. Eventually, operational carbon has taken over. And then with oil crisis, it dropped again. Where it goes green is where we're suggesting that if we're careful about how we put materials together, and we'll do that within the first week or two of seminars, after that, it's actually undertaking some exercises and very simple structural techniques, wall build-ups, construction technologies that show you that literally any building you like, from a house to a skyscraper, can be carbon negative. But do not forget the operational carbon. We'll show you how on most structures, even in urban conditions, you can achieve negative operational carbon. So just like your carbon sequestrating materials and balancing those with the low carbon materials, your operational carbon can take on-site renewables in one form or another in excess of what the building needs, hopefully. And we've got some examples of that. And you can give that excess to your neighbors who are currently struggling with carbon-intensive grids. Here are some examples that Steve, the engineer, Pierre, the stonemason, and I have worked on. Can anybody hear the phone ringing in the background? That's Steve trying to get through. I'm not sure if he hasn't worked out that this is a Zoom meeting, not a phone call. Anyway, moving on. So we'll go from low rise. And this is ultimately within the first couple of weeks of us seeing one another, deciding which of you wants to investigate low rise housing, and the technologies that are applicable to that, to mid rise. I'm flying through examples of these to show you that they're all possible, whether exotic in appearance or not. To standard stacking and very, very tall. Yep. So this is an 80-story structure in a seismic zone, which is a mixture of timber and stone, reinforced stone as it were. There'll be a field trip to come to the UK. That's the current tabled one, and from there from central London, looking at various schemes that have been finished in stone. We'll be traveling to quarries, spending a day in a quarry, learning how it's extracted, playing with some stone to create some arches and other sort of basic structures, then visiting stonemasons to see how that's cut up and potentially turned into reinforced beams. So here are some examples of those reinforced beams that then replace concrete and steel. So again, for those who are looking for the more exotic scaled structures, whether tall buildings or long arches and long spans, we're going to run through all of those, yeah, including composite, of mixing that stone and timber to again reduce not just the amount of steel and concrete, but even reduce the amount, if you're into cross-laminated and glue-lam type structures, how to reduce that by mixing it with a bit of stone. And again, here's some more of the more exotic examples that we finished a couple of years ago. Making use of waste stone. So this is from the tile industry all the way through, hopefully, if we have time. I'd like to think we do. We've managed to do it with other students, showing you how you can replace standard concrete and steel frames that then ultimately lead us, just by phone calls and talking to not just the supply chain, but typical developers, how we can demonstrate you're not relying on just us telling you, but demonstrate that we can replace whether it's the equivalent of a cement block or fired clay brick or concrete or steel beam. We can replace these directly from the supply chain. Now, this is an exercise some previous students undertook with us, the ones who are interested in houses. We just wanted to replace standard fired clay bricks, and within a couple of weeks of phoning various quarries, we had pallets arrive offering to sell the equivalent size standard fired clay brick that any bricklayer can put down, so you don't have to be a qualified stonemason, keeps the costs low, with stone bricks, and that's exactly the same price, but 98% less in its embodied carbon. Now, that was about 3-4 years ago. It's turned into an applicable thing with quarries around Europe now beginning to cut stone bricks for the construction sector. You have to remember places like England will buy 2.5 billion bricks, and back 4 years ago, until their students started phoning around, not a single quarry was offering a single brick into that 2.5 billion brick market. That has an immediate applicable effect, and let's see, whatever you're interested in, whether it's houses, low-rise, mid-rise housing, tall or exotic frames, let's find out whether we can sort of accelerate that supply chain, as well as you going away and having some expertise at the end of that semester in tackling any scale. Specifically, what you will design is up to you. We'll sit with you, and if you want to just tackle all the details of a 3-4 bedroom house, tall building, or a more institutional structure, let us know. We'll talk about the time that you have to do that, and we'll tailor to suit, as it were. I don't know if Steve and Pierre managed to join or not. They're currently all different parts of Europe. No, they're not there. Steve,
Yes,
calling
yes,
Steve. Pierre,
Ye-
perfect. Yeah, fire away,
yes, I am.
Pierre.
I can't really talk. I'm just in the middle of a Q&A at all, so unfortunately, I just follow what you were saying.
Okay.
And I just hope that we've got many students joining us for this adventure in stone. So I just don't want to be too disruptive with the background noise. So yes, I hope we will have many students very interested in joining that exciting course on building with stone. Thank you.
Steve just sent a message saying he still can't work out a password to get in, but I think he's pressing the wrong button. The other thing I should mention, we'll be flying in person every fortnight. So we'll be every fortnight in person for 2 days. We'll probably come in on the Wednesdays. So we'll do half a day on a Wednesday, full day on a Thursday, every fortnight, and then do it via Zoom the following week, and then back again in person. So I think in total that's probably about 8 in person, excluding obviously the week of field trip of travel. Great. I think that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Emin. Next up, we have Jermaine.
Thank you, Michael. Before I get started, I want to give a thank you to Vivian for this opportunity, and absolutely a thank you to Richard, who a couple years ago allowed me to come do a talk during his course, to which I had an amazing time at the U of T campus, and super excited about teaching here in the fall while I'm on sabbatical from the University of Miami, where I typically teach and direct the Master of Architecture program. So I am the founder and director of Studio Barnes. It is a architecture and design studio based in Miami, Florida. And a lot of the work that we do is centered around community and neighborhoods, and how might you work with individuals in a non-hierarchical process, as opposed to one that separates the architecture from the actual constituents. So the name of the studio is Let's Talk More Action. If you know me, to know me is to understand that I prefer to just be boots on the ground doing the thing, as opposed to sitting in the room talking about the thing. A lot of the work that we do, a lot of students ask me, how do you get these projects completed? And a lot of times I tell them it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Many times, as we all know, architecture and urbanism is a laborious process. The amount of time it takes to get codes changed and things of that nature, oftentimes the people that are harmed the most are those actual neighborhoods that need the help. So what does it mean to do community-oriented design? it means that you have to be willing to talk to people. So part of this studio, I'm sorry to tell you, you'll have to have conversations with real people in real life. As a part of that process, it will help you to better understand the needs of communities. And it'll also help you to humble yourself and realize that architects don't solve problems. Oftentimes we make new ones. Our job is to be the ones to help facilitate the needs that community members have who may not have the expertise to complete those tasks. So then how can a neighborhood succeed when the rules are stacked against them? This is where you come in, right? The purpose of this studio is to prototype and create small interventions that can then easily be given to community members and civic people so they can steward them on their own, so that they don't have to worry about or wait for a landscape architect, an architect, or an urban designer to save them. They can save themselves. Which leads me to the important question to ask, which is, what is the role of architects and designers? I think that's the first of the studio to have you ask yourself that. What type of architect and designer do you want to be? I would like to stress that while I am a licensed architect, this studio is not only for architects. If you are a landscape architect or an urban designer, we would love to have you as a part of the studio to talk about these various themes, because understanding various cities and rural environments is not a singular discipline's responsibility. So your site, Miami, Florida. This is Miami. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a lot of times people see Miami and all they see is the beach. Sorry to warn you, there's far more to Miami than just sunshine and sand. If you choose this studio, there will be a trip to Miami, upon which one of the days, yes, we will go to Miami Beach, but the other days you will go to those other communities and those other neighborhoods. On the screen, you will see some of those, various areas from Overtown to Liberty City, Coconut Grove, South Miami, North Miami. In the top right-hand corner, you see a yellow asterisk, which is slightly different than the other red ones. That is in a neighborhood called North Miami. And to give you an example of what I mean by projects to where the people took it into their own hands, as opposed to waiting for someone to save them, as a case study to see what you're getting yourself into, I would like to show you a very quick precedent project, and then I will get off the screen and let somebody else jump in. So this is a stormwater park. This is in North Miami, Florida. For many of you who don't know, Miami is water vulnerable, meaning it rains all the time and it floods all the time. And unfortunately, many neighborhoods and those that have people who don't have economic power or political power are often left with sites that flood consistently. And then what ends up happening is insurance companies stop insuring these properties. So again, it becomes this issue of how do you save yourself? So an amazing landscape architecture firm called Department worked with local community to say, you know what, we're not going to worry about what larger Miami or South Florida will do to save you. We're going to create our own park as a retention pond. And with this process, you'll be able to learn about what it means to do design, but do it in a way that is also sustainable, do it in a way that brings in multiple disciplines, and in the end, give something that the community can also lead, can steward, be in charge of, be a part of the process. And in the end, it became this amazing place that with a very, very small budget, with a bunch of community activism and a bunch of sweat equity, they made this amazing park that allows students and people to see the reality of what architecture can be when there's a whole lot less talking and a lot more action. Thank you. Oh yeah, and we're going to make an open source field guide. That'll be the output. At the end of the class, we'll have a thing that you then can hand to other communities, other people that you will be the author of, and you'll be able to say, hey, here's some interventions by how you may be able to help your own community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jermaine. Up next, we have Shane and Tura.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Tura, I'll share the screen.
Sure.
All right. Can everyone see the screen? All right, perfect. All right, so I'm Shane Loftus here with Tura Cousins-Wilson. Our studio, Beyond Cement and Steel, Climate Resilient Built Form in Barbados. So the focus of the studio is looking at climate resilient built form in Barbados, and also understanding how that could be more applicable both to the Caribbean and globally. And the focus here is that while the Caribbean has contributed the least to the climate crisis, small island states like Barbados are extremely vulnerable to rapidly advancing impacts of climate change. Sure, you want to go?
Yeah, this is just a photo of Hurricane Melissa in Grenada, so not obviously specific to Barbados, but as Shane said, many island nations in the Caribbean. Yeah, next slide. Go ahead, Shane.
So the focus of the studio is in the Scotland district of Barbados, which is around 20% of the island. And this most of the country is a very slow, not very steep plain that rises from the sea in the west towards a ridge in the east of the country. And on that western slope is where the sugarcane plantations were established in the 17th century, and where Barbados became one of the very early, very significant colonies that was established to supporting the slave trade. And the Scotland district on the East Coast, as you can see here, is a very steep area where the landscape very quickly falls towards the sea. It was also the area where enslaved people would escape and find uh, safety and security outside of the plantation system. And so in most of the country, you have very large fields of sugarcane. Much of the country still has these very large sugarcane fields.
Yeah, so as Shane was mentioning, since part of students will be becoming familiar with the history, the natural history, the colonial history, and its impact on architecture, built form, landscape, deforestation. Next slide. To vernacular forms of architecture in the Caribbean more broadly, but also specifically Barbados, the chattel house and its formation post-emancipation, and its relationship also to Canadian materials such as Canadian wood. Next slide is an image of that. And beyond just the sort of the materiality and aesthetics, but how they formed, how they were also resilient for climate and context to Barbados as typology. Go ahead, Shane.
And yeah, and also to round it out, so the chattel house was a housing type that was really established post-emancipation. And it was designed as a house that could be transported by the formerly enslaved people from one site to the next. So if they were working on one plantation as a sharecropper, they would, and if they had to move, they would move their entire house. So it was designed as a certain scale, certain dimensions, allowing them to relocate the house. And each subsequent addition to the house, as you can see here, by different gable, was of the same geometry, the same form. So expansion occurred through these similar forms, which, as I mentioned, was sourced from Canadian wood. So similar to some allusions to, I think Jane Williams was mentioning regarding ballast. So in the mid-19th century, the trade between the Caribbean and Canada involved both building materials and built form informed by Canadian forestry practices that played out in the Caribbean. And this is our site. So this is in the Scotland district along the east coast. We're looking at the forms, the built forms, the local context, and we'll be speaking with builders on the ground, local communities, local individuals to understand both housing needs and also understand construction techniques and more, which we'll get into. The Barbados government had launched in 2019 the Roofs to Reefs National Resilience Program, which is a program that looks to holistically enhance the island's climate resilience with a focus on the built environment, infrastructure, nature, and ecosystems. So a truly holistic look at how to reimagine the environment from a sustainable perspective, looking at materials and infrastructure that exists on the island and that could support a circular approach to construction. And this studio is actually part of a larger research project entitled Beyond Cement and Steel, pursuing multi-hazard community climate resilience through built and natural form design in the Scotland district of Barbados and across the Caribbean. It's a partnership between the School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, as well as the University of West Indies and their Center for Climate Smart and Resilient Development. And we're also partnering with an architecture practice in Barbados for this work. So the studio will focus on exploring how climate resilient, culturally relevant architectural and agroforestry practices can be locally integrated to promote just and equitable health outcomes and livelihoods for lower income and lower middle income residents living in the more vulnerable geographies of their island states. Students will understand the opportunities available in designing climate and economically resilient housing centered on a circular approach to material resources. And this is particularly relevant in a small island state with limited natural resources and significant waste management costs. So anything that is wasted typically gets shipped off the island. So understanding how to reuse materials and minimize waste is a significant consideration. And we'll also learn about the political, cultural, and built history and the ways in which politics, culture, and geography have informed the built heritage of Barbados. And we'll explore the colonial and historical ties that link the architecture and landscape architecture practices of Canada and Barbados, and the particularities and best practices identified in Barbados can support a further understanding of the urgency of circular construction and climate resilient construction globally. Yeah. Sure, you have continue.
Sure. That's the slide there. So yes. So you're on the last slide there.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think just I was just looking at the Google Slides. I think one point, so we will be, I think like the other students, we will be traveling to Barbados. It's a very small island, so we'll be not only in the Scotland district, but also in Bridgetown and other parts of the island to see seeing a note to see the site, and yeah, really looking forward to this. Wrapping up here as we're seeing a note, we're over 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Up next, we have Fadi.
Hi, everybody. Just also a quick note to say, this is a really special moment in your education, in your professional design education. So I really want to encourage students from all disciplines to apply for different option studios, even if they're not 100% in your comfort zone. I think it's a really important moment for landscape architects, and urban designers to not just mix with each other, but learn about how each discipline operates. So to that end, all landscape studios are open to all architecture and urban design students and vice versa. So yeah, let me just share. Can you see my screen? Yes? I can't see you guys.
All
So I don't
good.
know if you
All
can.
good.
All right, great. All right, so my studio is titled Seeing Red, Designing for Extreme Optimism. And I want to start out by this quote by Edward Said, who says, "Just as none of us is outside or beyond geography, none of us is completely free from the struggle over geography. That struggle is complex and interesting because it's not only about soldiers and cannons, but also about ideas, about forms, about images and imaginings." Seeing Red asks what the ancient landscape of the Red Sea can teach us about designing cities in an age of climate change, geopolitical tensions, and environmental uncertainty. The studio approaches geography not as a neutral setting, but as a contested field shaped by ecology, representation, power, history, and imagination. Located in Jordan at the northern tip of the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aqaba, we will understand this geography not as an isolated resort town or logistical gateway city, but as part of a connected Red Sea landscape whose environmental systems exceeds its political borders. The city region is currently governed by the Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority, which has been actively pursuing large-scale development projects while balancing environmental stewardship, tourism growth, and infrastructure investment. And just to give you an idea, its population is expected to double in size in the next 20 years, and its extreme rainfall intensity has increased by 300%. So you're seeing these pressures of economic development and climate pressures intensify. Our projects will in turn support the authority in envisioning its urban growth trajectory and help them develop new forms of public realm, housing, mobility, and infrastructure. And the region is not on the shores of just a Red Sea, but also an ancient red desert landscape that has been shaped by settlement, trade, migration, and overlapping empires for millennia. Today, Aqaba sits at the meeting point of where the desert, mountains, and the sea come together, and it offers a compelling site for rethinking urban development in an era of extreme uncertainty. It is truly a safe haven and an oasis in a really tumultuous region. So Jordan in general and Aqaba has been, a really safe haven in a place that has been anything but that. So the studio will also critically examine how the regional models of urbanization have relied on resource-intensive infrastructure and spectacular forms. For example, NEOM, which is a massive $500 billion futuristic megacity project in northwest Saudi Arabia, is just 2 to 3 hours south of our site, and other more contextual and vernacular precedents that will not be treated as styles to reproduce, but as a resource of environmental and spatial intelligence. So as this is an option studio, one semester before your thesis, there will be no prescribed program per se, but instead it'll be structured through a series of prompts. The first one is that heat is a form giver, so climate comfort should dictate morphology, from courtyards that enable passive cooling to how streets maximize shade, orientation, thermal mass, ventilation, nighttime occupation. The studio will ask you to investigate forms of contemporary climatic urbanism informed by passive systems, shaded public spaces, and seasonal rhythms, vernacular intelligence, and distinctive urban forms. The second is that water scarcity is not water absence. Think of ephemeral wadis, flash floods, wastewater desalination, groundwater, marine systems, and hydrological territories that shape urbanism. Topography is a relational urban form generator. The city is emergent from and a reflection of its terrain. All of its infrastructure, its open spaces, and its land uses are dictated by the land's contours. We don't erase them or blow them up, we embrace them. Projects are situated within a particular geography. In Aqaba's case, it's an urban section that starts in the desert mountains, from peak to valley to plain to beach to reef, and ultimately to open water. The fifth is that borders are constructs with spatial implications that are wider than a line. They are manifestations of power. They operate through views, routes, labor, trade, security, environmental systems, and disrupted cultural connections and relationships. The sixth is that tourism is extractive, but could also be regenerative. Here you see the value in US dollars of coral reefs and tourism in the Red Sea, highlighting hotspots of reef tourism in the central and northern region near our site and in Egypt. And when considering symbiotic relationships, for example, among tourism, labor, ecosystems, and long-term resilience, researchers around the Red Sea are learning how Corals here are in fact the most heat tolerant in the world, and they may be the key to protecting the fragile ecosystem worldwide. To that end, conservation cannot just be a branded label to offset what is otherwise resource-intensive and destructive developments. Through design, we could imagine new forms of integrated ecological infrastructure that support and enhance conservation as well as urban development. Lastly, contemporary forms must be climatically situated, understanding that thousands of years of inhabiting this context generates a spatial tectonic and formal intelligence. To that end, we'll investigate forms of contemporary climatic urbanism that has been informed by the context and the culture and cultural references. The studio is both rejects nostalgic imitations and resource-intensive futurism, but thinks of ways to reinterpret and adapt them in order to create something entirely new. And lastly, there is no instant smart city. Every mega project branded as smart ultimately fails. Learning to incrementally adapt to your environmental context is in fact a form of intelligence and proven to be the smartest and enduring form of them all. We will work in transects that start at the coast, traverses the urban region, develops new forms of public realm, tourism, housing, mobility, and infrastructure, foregrounds ecological and environmental systems, and thinks of its expansion in relation to the broader region and all the externalities that come with it. So in this case, I just want to say that extreme optimism in an area that is very difficult and contested is a design position. It's a conviction that alternative futures can be spatially imagined, institutionally supported, and materially constructed, even in these very difficult places. We will monitor the political situation closely and follow the Government of Canada's travel advisories. If it is safe to travel to the region in October, we will have a partially sponsored trip. The alternative is for us to visit Lanzarote in the Canary Islands, where the island's arid climate, tourism-driven economy, and extreme landscape offers a parallel set of case studies to learn from. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vadi. Up next, we have Craig.
Hey, just trying to share. Uh-oh. Um, Here we go. Sorry. Okay. Everyone see that okay?
All good.
Great. Hi, folks. My name's Craig Douglas, and it's a real pleasure to be with you here today. And delighted to be joining Daniel's this semester. I'm speaking to you tonight. 14 hours in the future. I'm coming from Naarm, which, as it's known by its Indigenous name, commonly known as Melbourne, Australia. And so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of and custodians of the land from which I am joining you here today, the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. By way of introduction, I am a landscape architect and an architect. For the last 9 years, I've been teaching at the GSD, where I coordinated core landscape studios alongside interdisciplinary option studios, bringing together students from architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design. These interdisciplinary conversations have always been super rich and really exciting, and I hope to create that same kind of collaborative spirit and environment at Daniel's. My research explores innovative techniques and methodologies that examine the agency of representation in design. I conceive landscape and the built environment as a dynamic material process in a constant state of flux, approached through analytical and conceptual models that integrate drawing, modeling, simulation, and sensing to make visible and reconstitute the landscape as a complex temporal and material manifold of differential space. And so I'm just showing you maybe some of that work in the background as I talk. By visualizing air as a material medium with its own geometries, behaviors, and processes, my work expands the concept of landscape to foreground the emergence, process, and environmental agency to augment our static realities. Through this lens, I explored design as an activity that seeks to understand and respond to the challenges of urbanization in a rapidly changing world in the age of the climate crisis. The studio that I'm sharing with you today is called The City of Air, Atmospheric Encounters and the Breathing Commons. We do not see the whirls, eddies, and twists of air, nor the continually shifting gradients of heat, humidity, particulate matter, pressure, scent, and biological exchange that move through every city. Yet we experience these conditions before we see them. We encounter the city perhaps first through respiration, through inhaling. Once we begin to perceive these invisible processes, the city reveals itself not simply as a collection of buildings and spaces, but as a living atmospheric field through which urban life is continually produced. This work that you're seeing here is some research that I did as a fellowship at the American Academy in Rome that challenged the notion of the Nolli map, the void, the white, the kind of dismissed space as being actually a territory, a very dynamic territory of inhabitation and production. The studio proposes a different way of thinking about design. And so rather than treating air as the passive background of urban life, we will investigate it as a primary medium through which the cities are experienced and transformed. Design shifts from composing isolated objects towards working with dynamic environmental fields that connect bodies, buildings, landscapes, infrastructures, and climate. And we'll be looking at some of these references and some intriguing case studies to think about this kind of history of thinking about or forgetting about air, as it were, in design. Our laboratory for this investigation will be in Athens, Greece, the mystical city of Athens, one of Europe's leading cities for climate adaptation. Through projects including Cooling Havens, the Redefining the City Resilience Strategy 2030, and the Mega Resilience Triple Green Development Project, Athens has become an international model for responding to extreme urban heat, air pollution, air quality through landscape, ecology, architecture, and urban design. Our focus will be on a district where the relocation of the stadium presents an extraordinary opportunity to rethink housing, public space, landscape, and climate adaptation together. Here, climate adaptation is not simply a technical problem, it becomes one of defining design's question of our time. Through the semester, students will invent a category of civic infrastructure and infrastructure of the atmosphere. Rather than designing conventional parks or buildings, you will develop new forms of public amenities of air that improve thermal comfort, environmental quality, ecological performance, and civic life, working across interconnected scales of the body, building, neighborhood, city, and the atmosphere. You'll investigate how architecture, landscape architecture, and urban design can actively shape the environments that we breathe. We'll be exploring model making, environmental sensing, film simulation, AI-assisted analysis, not simply as techniques of representation, but as technologies of perception that extend our capacity to observe and to engage the dynamic processes through which cities continually emerge. The ambition is not simply to design buildings or landscapes, but to imagine entirely new forms of space organized around the atmosphere itself. We'll be joined through the semester by an outstanding group of guest critics and lecturers, including Daniel Barber, Tommaso Bitossi from Transolar, an incredible engineering firm that, thinking about inside, outside. Eleni Morelli from the United Nations Global Chief Officer, Klaus Lowenhart, and Fadi Masoud, who you just met. Ultimately, this studio asks a simple but provocative question. What if the primary medium of design is air? If atmosphere is the primary medium of design, then design becomes a choreography of environmental exchange across space, time, and material. City of Air imagines a future in which atmosphere is understood as essentially a civic infrastructure, and where architects, landscape architects, and urban designers work together to cultivate conditions through which cities breathe. If you're interested in imagining new possibilities for design in a rapidly changing world, I'd love for you to join me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. Up next, we have Martin.
So first question, you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So hello, everyone. Great to see you, even though I can't see you. My studio this semester is called Where the City Meets the Sea. My name is Martin. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer. I'm Swedish, worked across Europe for many years, today back in Sweden, but working on projects around Europe, Canada, and China. I'm the founder of the design studio MandaWorks. At MandaWorks, we work across scales, from strategic planning to built landscapes. So for us, there's not really ever border between landscape architecture, urban design, and architecture. So I think this project is very much, again, a borderless project for you to understand. MandaWorks is based in Stockholm, Sweden, with offices in Montreal and Shanghai. And despite their differences in size, Sweden and Canada share landscapes, climates, and cultural relationships with nature that I think can inspire new ideas and perspectives for this studio. Can landscape become the driving force in transforming an entire city district? This semester, we'll explore how landscape can shape identity, guide development, and transform cities. We'll test this question in the southern part of Scandinavia, using a site as a laboratory. The site is in Malmö, Sweden, which is across the water from Copenhagen, Denmark. These two cities, Copenhagen and Malmö, are connected with a bridge and a tunnel and form a unified metropolitan region. The site itself is called Nyhamnen. The English translation would be the new harbor. It used to be the industrial harbor. It's been so for 150 years. And today it's only asphalt, silos, warehouses, and quays. And all these elements of the site are the starting point for something new that we can work with. So before and after, but it's really not a fixed image, because the city of Malmö is currently working on this. Nothing is yet built. But when working on this vision together with stakeholders and organizations and investors, they're looking for new ways. Their ambition is to explore a different approach to urban transformation, one that builds on the site's existing conditions, reuses valuable structures, and creates a more contextual form of development. In the studio, we'll be collaborating with the Malmö's planning department and the city architect and other stakeholders, and your work will become part of the ongoing conversation at the city. In this studio, landscape is the starting point, and we want designs to perform. By landscape, it can be many things, and many questions that we will ask us will guide us to the different options of design. How can your landscape manage sea level rise? How can it boost biodiversity? How does it organize buildings and create memorable spaces where people actually want to hang out? And what is very important that I all want us to search for are the hidden qualities, the hidden layers. What's behind what we see? What's underneath the surface, behind the walls of the buildings, etc. I want you really to experiment and have fun. This is a project from the Netherlands of a former colleague of mine, Ronald Rietveld. So one approach to this studio is to treat our site as a transition lab, to ask us the question on how can we reuse what's already there to create a new identity. Throughout the semester, we will search, test, and explore different forms and approaches, different concepts. And through this process, each project will develop its own design story, a clear narrative that connects the site, the idea, to the final proposal. We'll work in 3 parts. First, we'll read the site to understand its different layers, what is hidden, etc. Secondly, we'll test ideas by sketching, failing the sketches, discussing the sketches, and trying again. And we will finally land a vision. Your final project will be renderings, drawings, or animations to tell your story of how your design evolved. Great districts are made of unique pieces that strengthen one another. Your project focuses on one of those pieces, but contributes to the larger vision. The ambition is not to solve the entire district, but to develop a strong contribution, one idea that can influence and strengthen the wider vision for Nyhamnen. So transform what's already there, add, adapt, and reinterpret the site's existing elements. I want you to dream big. I want you to create ideas that perform, inspire, and challenge conventions. Step outside of your comfort zone and test ideas. This is a winning scheme of MBRDV just being presented last week. And throughout the studio, you'll build arguments that connect to your observations, discoveries, and design decisions. Almost any idea is possible, as long as we can follow the traces from the site to your vision. Every bold design needs a good narrative. Through pin-ups, discussions, lectures, and tutorials, we'll investigate the site together, and we will step inside it. As an optional part of the studio, we'll make a trip to Sweden and Denmark. We will visit the site, explore projects, meet with people, and work on site. We'll spend time in Copenhagen and Malmö. And the idea is also to visit Stockholm, where we will be able to work on your project in my studio, visit other projects, and meet with people. It's an optional travel. And if you don't go, no worries. The people who travel will collect the material and bring it back to the studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Last but certainly not least, we have Nicholas and Euros.
Hello. Give me a second. We'll share the screen. Can you see this?
All good.
Awesome. Well, good, almost still morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Life Aquatic. My name is Nico.
I'm Euros.
And we are 2 of the co-founders of Office U, an architecture, landscape, and urban design practice based in Toronto, but with projects around the world. So we'll start maybe with a little story, origin story. Euros and I met while working at Zeidler a little over 12 years ago. And at that time, there was a fantastic model collecting dust in the deepest depth of the basement storage room. So the model was of a project called Harbor City. And in the late 1960s, Ev Zeidler proposed this Harbor City, which was a daring vision for transforming the island airport into a new neighborhood of islands and canals. And while it now lives in a dusty basement, it was a wild vision, and it gained critical acclaim from urbanists like Jane Jacobs. And it was extremely provocative. It was inspiring, but it was also divisive. And ultimately, the project was abandoned, in part due to political reasons, but also due to obvious ecological concerns. Like many projects of the era, including Kenzo Tange's vision for the Bay of Tokyo, It had incredible ambition, but it prioritized car transit and lacked environmental sensitivity.
So while Turner Harbor today doesn't look like Zeidler's or Tange's project, it's also created through major infrastructural interventions. This is not like a natural place. It's a project. It's a product of large-scale, purposeful human activity. And for us, the islands exemplify a place that has its own and unique culture that is very intimately tied to the water, that feels very removed from the city, but is actually in very close proximity to it. And the popularity and the actual kind of overcrowding of island spaces like the Hanlan's Point Beach should be interpreted as an indication that Torontonians need more ways to engage with the lake and more spaces to engage with the water. We have looked at like many cultures around the world that have actually embraced the waters around them and beneath them, sometimes by necessity, sometimes by opportunity. Examples of this are the floating villages of the Ura people on Lake Titicaca, the Venetian Lagoon, Tenochtitlan, which became Mexico City, or the inhabited Legakers in Netherlands, which are a product of a local peat extraction industry. And each of these places has basically harnessed the natural resources of their place to foster a culture that is linked to the water. And if you compare the scale of the Niagara Basin, which is the western lobe of Lake Ontario, it is kind of comparable to the Lake Titicaca or the Saronic Gulf, which is the Gulf of Athens, and kind of these places that have a very strong connection to the water. Yet while the Lake Ontario is the ecological, hydrological, economic, and cultural backbone of the Golden Horseshoe, in comparison to these places, our relationship to it remains very distant.
So this studio essentially invites you to amplify our relationship with the lake, to consider water on equal footings as land, and to develop unique ways in which we may live within the waters of Lake Ontario. Of course, this time with a greater emphasis on ecology. So during the course of the semester, you'll be encouraged to blend topography and bathymetry. They'll form a continuum as you'll be encouraged to blur, to dissolve, to expand, to restructure, to cut and fill the Niagara Basin and the coastlines of the Golden Horseshoe. So the same way Buckminster Fuller did it with his unfoldings of the Damexian map, you'll be asked to turn the way we perceive the relationship of land and water upside down. And you'll be asked to do this on at least two interconnected scales. On a regional scale, you will study the ecological processes of the lake and the forces driving development around its shores. You will envision a regional development master plan within the Niagara Basin supporting growth while also increasing ecosystem health, connectivity, and transportation along and across Lake Ontario. So to inform the designs, you will study the processes of the lake, both natural and anthropogenic in this case. So here we're showing two different types of processes, including longshore drift and the spread of invasive species like Phragmites. You will then be asked to zoom in on a specific site within the envisioned regional master plan and to develop one eco-district. It's a type of terra fluxus integrated within the ecosystems and within the processes of Lake Ontario. And so sites may include the Humber Bay, the Niagara Fan, the Hamilton Harbor, or even the middle of the lake as far as we're concerned. But you will essentially be responsible for selecting a site within your master plan. And you will also be responsible for deciding the scale and the program This could be mixed use. It could be a residential design, could be commercial, could be recreational, industrial, agricultural, aquacultural, could be a mix of all of these. And finally, you will decide upon the ratio of built to landscape spaces. So here are some examples of diverse design typologies and scales, which all have a different take on what it means to live within water. And ultimately, across all scales of design, each proposal will seek to achieve an ecological, social, and economic triple bottom line, and create places that support a lifestyle that is unique to Lake Ontario. The lake and its shorelines are spaces that are both precious and open to change, in need of care, attention, and transformation, but most of all, in need of ambition. So we'll be inviting you to be sensitive, but to be wild in your proposals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nico, and everybody for your presentations. Before we break into the breakout rooms, I just want to remind all students that all travel studios are optional. So if the professors didn't alert to that, it's just assumed across the board. And any of your classmates who are traveling will bring back pertinent information related to the studio. Should you have questions about the bursary, I'm happy to answer it, I guess, in this main room. But otherwise, we are going to distribute you, or you're going to jump around to your own Q&A rooms. So Michael, I will let you facilitate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I will begin opening the breakout rooms. Please give us a few minutes to sort the instructors, and then you should be able to all jump in.
Michael, you might want to just monitor the chat for questions from students.
The ballot is due on the form itself. I believe it says noon. So you can check the form and the instructions are there. The ballot should not be due in 15 minutes. Let me look at the form. Maybe there has been a mistake. 1 second. It's due Wednesday, July 29th at noon. So in 2 days. Any other questions that students have for me while I'll just maybe explain as you're jumping around that in essence, if you do plan to travel, you will be paying out of pocket. And then there is a bursary that's offered by the ORSS office, and you can apply for those. So Michael or the programs office can send more specific information on that process. And you can also stay here if you want to ask questions about that with Michael and myself.
Hi, Vivian. I
Hi.
noticed some studio is traveling to the US. As for the international student who holding a foreign passport, right now the Toronto duration for US visa is about 1.5 years. So I was wondering, do Daniels help the international student to apply to the US visas?
This is precisely why all travel is optional. So there are potentially visa problems, potentially financial problems. So in those cases, you will do your best. And if you are not allowed to travel, we have no means of expediting that visa.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just a note, all the breakout rooms are open. You're fully capable of jumping into the breakout rooms. If you follow the ... at the bottom, it should open the breakout room main main view window, and then you can choose which session you'd like to join.
Do I need to do something to get into the right space?
Oh, yes, I need to add you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Does the ... I'm not seeing meeting rooms appear. That's... Oh, no, it's there now.
Okay, good.
Thanks. I guess while we're here, I have a question. At the risk of not clicking on the ballot and then having to leave it open, is it 5 again that we're balloting, or is there a different number that ultimately we're going to be balloting for? Or do we rank it from 1 to 13?
To look at the form. I believe there's 5 choices, and you will choose your top 5.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Maybe actually, Michael, maybe just in case, can we add I'm gonna see what this was like last year. We might need more than 5, maybe 6 to 7. Just to have it would be helpful, Michael. Do you think